between Daniel Cawdery and Ronnie van Tonder. And Daniel Cawdery, at this stage of his life, it's 2003. His rating was 2182. He only got his FM title, I think, in 2014 or 2013. And Ronnie van Tonder, back then, was the 2002 South African Open champ. He placed first after the tiebreak games, and this game they're playing in the South African Championship, which repeats every second year and is an invitational. And so you can kind of imagine this is now Cawdery wanting to show the guy that previously won the South African Open that in the invitational tournament he might not be the best. But the competition is tough and Ronnie is well prepared. So let's get into the game. We've got Cawdery going 1, e4, as in the previous game. c5, we've got another Sicilian, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes. And in the previous game we had queen takes d4, but it looks like back in 2003 Cawdery had a different approach. He went knight takes d4, normal Sicilian, and then the move knight f6, knight c3, not going for, as I was saying, the Morocco bind, this type of structure. This was never his style. And then we have a dragon, not a knight off. So after g6 we have bishop e2, and we can already kind of see the difference in this game versus the queen takes d4 game. The knight's immediately on the square d4, and you have this bishop for that knight in this game. Okay, so we've got the move bishop g7 and both sides castle, rook e1, knight c6. And now the move knight b3, yet again Cawdery doing his little Ayekain movement, but this is mainline, it's not his theory. And we've got the move bishop e6, one of the main moves, and nice having that bishop on e6 because it's not really blocking anything, it's an active part of the game, and already poses some questions to white. Now in the game the move bishop f1 was played, restructuring, thinking about fianchettoing himself, and we've got the move rook c8. The other main move is a5, not big differences. Rook c8, big differences in terms of your prep though, but not a big difference in evaluation, roughly the same. And now we have bishop g5. Not as early as in the other games, because now we've got the dragon and this knight is actually quite fine, pawn structure is resolved, and the move now, which makes the game completely, I think a new game, not yet, but just a move that isn't seen as often, knight e5 played. And I think the idea with knight e5 is that the move knight d5 is coming, and after these types of developing moves you will play knight e5 in any case. So he does it already, so we get a position after knight e5, knight e5, knight d5, bishop takes, e takes, which is roughly similar to it's roughly similar to playing a move as black now versus and having the move versus doing it a bit differently, going knight e5 after this trade. So it just switches the order around a bit, but it's not too profound a new move. But in the game knight e5 is just met by knight d5, and there's a captures and e takes. And now Ronnie's preparation seems to be queen c7 at this point, and I think the computers mark them as roughly equal. Though I don't think I'd play queen c7 myself. It does hit the c3 pawn, and you have access to b6 and other squares on the queen side. You could probably still shift your way to the king side if needed, but queen d7 seems a bit stronger because you already have access to a lot of these squares. It feels a bit more malicious, and you're making up for the fact that you don't have a light squared bishop. Okay, so, but Ronnie goes queen c7, nothing wrong. c3 defends the pawn, and now the move rook f e8. Bit provocative because Cawdery should really be trying to fianchetto now. This is a good developmental idea. Use your strong bishop on a good diagonal, but he goes bishop b5 first. And now Ronnie just goes rook d8. So you could ask yourself, why didn't he just go rook d8 immediately? And it's to provoke this bishop from leaving the fianchetto square. But Cawdery is quite fine with doing this. And the computer here just recommends retreating with your bishop. Just go back bishop f1, try and fianchetto again. Instead, the move a4 is played. And this is kind of the same as what Ronnie just did, forcing, now he's forcing black to make some kind of move that kind of weakens the position, and he does so. He goes a6. So by not retreating the bishop immediately, Ronnie tries to get it away from the square, where it could be doing something. And now, since a6 has been played, we can already see the weakness of b6. If you get in the move a5, you can reroute this knight somehow and get into that square, and it should just be killer. So that might be a long-term plan by going a4 first, but then he goes back bishop f1. So, okay, he gets bishop f1, he could maybe still do g3, and now the move h6 in the game. The computer just wants to go bishop c1 immediately now to not step into any knight moves. Cawdery first steps into the knight move, maybe intentionally, maybe not, and then goes bishop c1. I don't know if there's a big difference. Maybe there is, but it just seems relatively the same. If you'd gone bishop c1 immediately, you take away some of the strength of knight c4. If knight c4 is played, then maybe you can play a5 immediately. You've got that extra tempo. But it's not too clear, because now black might not even go knight c4 anymore. He might just try and redevelop some pieces and change his game plan. Then you'd gone bishop c1 for not too much of a reason. Now you're committing his knight to the queen side, which I kind of like. Bishop e3 and then bishop c1. And we've got the move knight b6. And this could maybe be why the evaluation kind of falls. It's because you kind of realize that, okay, well, the d5 pawn is now hanging, and it feels like it's lost. But the move h6 was already a bit of a weakness in black side of the camp, and the pawn can be won back like this, and Cawdery shows us. Firstly by going a5, now getting this good pawn in, and a5 is actually quite a big commodity in this position, and we will see how Cawdery uses this later on. This one tempo he won. So we've got the move knight takes, and now after the move c4, you only have one square for the knight, and that is b4. And so playing the move bishop e3, already using this pawn for that tempo to threaten this, you're also lifting your bishop up and preparing queen d2 against that pawn, which will be a fork, regaining that pawn you just lost. Okay. But now c3 is not in the game anymore, and this bishop seems a lot stronger. So maybe queen d2 and getting rid of that bishop is also an idea now. So, okay, rook d7 is played to get out of the spin, and it's not too clear why you'd want to play rook d7. Rook e8 seems a lot more sound, but maybe he wants to keep the rook on the file for some reason. I can't figure out rook d7. It wants to double the rooks here maybe, but this bishop is still eyeing that square any moment now. And if you remember from the match Carlsen just lost against Alireza, the Bantamweight Cup, Alireza simply plays g3 in this position, and suddenly bishop h3 could be a big threat. Not this exact position, but a very similar one with the two rooks lined up on this file, and then you need to play something like e6, and you can feel black's position already feeling like it's becoming a bit too vulnerable, and the bishops have targets, and they're doing well, and the rooks aren't really achieving anything. Okay, but so in the game, rook d7 played, but it's not, you can't really do anything about it immediately. Something like g3 now and you can have a move like d5 even, and now after bishop h3, you can play your rook away, and maybe just rook e8, and then so black should have compensation for the exchange now, because this was quite a good bishop. But this could have also definitely been a plan from Cawdery's side. Okay, but in the game, rook d7 and queen d2 played, the tempo idea to win back the pawn, and then we've got the move knight c6, and now taking that pawn, regaining it and challenging this bishop, which could become a strong piece. And something like bishop a8 is a bit too slow in this position, and we can already feel that some maneuvers might not work out now, because this pawn is now weakness, can't move forward, and you're cramping in black's position. So he just keeps it there and goes d5 immediately, breaking for the center, using this rook for the reason he kept it on the file. And now we can kind of see why the move rook d7 was played instead of rook e8. And so we have the move knight c5, just hitting that rook. The rook moves back, and honestly, I think just taking this bishop at this point would just be a lot better than what happened. And although it does allow some of these maneuvers, after rook takes d5, this spin, and this is defended, you have some space, and black isn't immediately launching an attack here. So, okay. But bishop takes g7 wasn't played first. After rook d8, we've got the move queen g5, getting out of these pins. And then we got the move knight e4. Now, in this position, Ronnie really could have made a bit of an improvement. Instead of going knight e4, immediately hitting the knight, because Cawdery simply went b4 to defend it. And you can kind of see these pawns are quite high up the board already, and his queen side doesn't seem too bad. He could have tried king h7 instead of knight e4. King h7 is a bit stronger, immediately threatening to take this bishop, so you need to take, and then king takes g7. Now you kind of force matters, and now rook a c1 is an idea. So you really need to try and get that. So again, that's not played, but again, knight e4, centralizing, and now b4, and now he kind of goes for his idea. It takes a bit longer to get that king on g7, but he does so. First goes bishop takes h6, queen takes, and now knight f5. This knight maneuver quite nice, back to the king side. After the queen moves, now king g7. And finally, we have what we wanted as black, but white's still doing fine, and bishop d3 played. Now you can see why the king is on g7, and capturing this knight now doesn't work, just simply because of queen takes check first. After the king moves, then rook h5, and you're picking up that piece back, and you've won a pawn down here, and white's king is very messy now. So in the game, we've just got h3 first, and move rook h5 immediately, followed by queen d2, captures, and some development, and now a blunder from Ronnie, but Cawdery doesn't see why this is a blunder. And if you want to pause the video right here, do so. I'll give you like 2 seconds to pause. Okay, so why this is a blunder is because of a crazy move. Bishop takes f7. And positionally, you are quite crushing now. The threat is obviously knight e6 check. And recapturing that bishop, this is met by knight e6 in any case. And this queen isn't retreating back to the rook anytime soon. Let's even say what could be played, queen d2. Doesn't matter where the queen goes to defend the rook. It's only got 2 squares really. It's going to be made by knight takes d8 check, and after queen takes g8, the move strong move at the end of the continuation, because otherwise it will just kind of be two minors for the piece and a bit of an exposed king. The strong move here is g4, and g4 is a very tricky move to deal with. You can't go rook g5 because of f4, which is even more crushing, and all the squares the queen could maybe start opening up on the king are kind of taken. So you need to go back with the rook, and then simply g takes and g takes, and white is up the exchange, and his king is actually safe here. Okay, so in this position, bishop takes is a very strong move. Going g5 now would just be a devastating blunder because of the move rook d2. And suddenly white needs to defend this pawn, because otherwise you're getting mated. And doing so with something like rook f1 would just be met by another centralizing move, knight d4. And black is sacking that piece and really just getting at your king. So rook e2 can be tried after captures. Black is not really suffering because of this fork. We still have the move knight d4. And this rook gets down. Okay, so that wasn't the idea of the tactic. The idea of the tactic was to use the fork, but only to do so later on in the game when the threats aren't there anymore. So when you do see something like this fork, try and think about how to utilize it in a different way than your opponent expects you to. Because obviously Ronnie doesn't just play queen f4 for no reason, allowing g4. But in the game, a normal move was played, but it doesn't capitalize on this fact. Queen e4, and after queen d2, and the queens are traded, then we see the move rook e2, stopping this rook from playing on the second. Yet again, stuff like this could just be made by knight takes e4 and g takes h5. You can first take the knight. Should be fine. It should be drawish. Or you can try and play for more with this type of fork. And after knight takes, you can go for the rook. For the bishop. Definitely an idea. So Ronnie makes sure he doesn't lose by this fork, and Cawdery gets out of the fork. Gets out of the attack, so that this is still a threat. He goes rook e2, and the rook just goes back up the board to d4, and now the move bishop takes a6 is played. And this is also just a crazy move from Cawdery. It kind of blunders the initiative away. He wants these two pass pawns, which he has been playing with earlier in the game, moving them up with tempo, to just run through and win the game for it. And it doesn't really work if precise play happens. And precise play is actually just two moves now in this moment. The first move to find is rook c4. And what rook c4 does is it keeps pressure on b4, and it vacates the d4 square for the knight to come over immediately. So if, for example, something like rook b1, then we have knight d6, and a lot of your issues are solved, and you will probably pick up this pawn. And if something more aggressive to try and get the rook up the board immediately, then you could kick it away, and stuff like this shouldn't be too scary. But Cawdery's two queenside pawns are strong in particular because of Ronnie not vacating this square for the knights to play with and move over to the queen side. Ronnie goes knight d6 immediately, and this allows rook takes e7, which you probably saw. But now a second blunder just throws the game away. We've got rook b5. Now you could probably play king f8 and try and switch over to the queen side with your king. But it's not too clear. This should be a draw after this knight vacates the square. But instead, after rook takes e7, he goes knight e5, and he blunders the following tactic. You can also pause to see if you can find it, but this one's not too difficult. First, it starts with knight c7, threatening knight e6 with this fork. Can't go here or anything, or even there, because it's still check and discovery. So the move rook takes is played, and they trade here. And at this moment, the game is actually over just because of the strength of the a-pawn. The pawn rolls up, the other knight tries to join, to rook b7. He trades his rook because there's not much to do. And there's really no defense against this pawn after it gets to a7. Ronnie played knight e6. You could try just blocking the pawn, knight a8, but rook b1, knight c6, rook b8, you'll get knight c7 in any case, kind of like this in the game, except the rook being there still can't be captured because of queen. And after something like this, the pieces are traded, and now Cawdery makes it very clear that the game is won by just simply taking that knight here. And this pawn endgame is completely winning. Interesting to show how he plays. He just gets into this position and then enters with his king. Another way black could have another thing you want to do, which black is trying to do, is he's trying to keep opposition and make things tricky. So he's meeting this move by going back here, but then you need to stay behind this pawn, and then these pawns are extra tempos, and then when you have this position, you use your h pawn as your last tempo to kick the king out, and either one of these squares your king enters. And this was the final move of the game. Black resigned. King f6, not much to do. No defending this pawn as well. 2 more moves. Okay, we got 3 pawns. Okay, so this was instructive. The strong rook takes on the knight sack for the 2 pawns on the queen side. A bit imprecise, but a very practical thing to do in the game. And immediately after doing that, the pressure was just on, and 2 blunders followed. And I think that's a typical thing Cawdery does. Is he doesn't necessarily play super precise, but he puts you in a situation where you need to do so. Okay, thank you for watching.